You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All right, folks, we've been talking the election. 27 days left before Election Day, but we're already in Election Day with early voting starting all across the country, with people dropping mail-in balloting all across the country. And folks, there's a new poll from the political advocacy group Black Futures Lab, which shows that black folks say they're not deterred from showing up to the polls in spite of all the efforts by Republicans to turn them away. 81% of respondents say they plan on voting in the general election. We're joined by with the details with Alicia Garza, principal with the Black Futures Lab, and Terrance Woodbury, an analyst for. First of all, we had you used to be with Brilliant Corners, but you're now with Terrance, name of the group?
Yeah, CEO at Hitch Strategies, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. So they had the old title there in the script there. Let me first start with you, Terrance. You conducted this poll. Give people just the basic overview of what it says.
So this is, fascinating research, and what I appreciate, I want to thank Alicia Garza and Black Future Labs, because far too often in polling, black folks get reduced down to a single crosstab, or even less than that. We even get reduced down to people of color in a crosstab. And so this robust research allowed us to really open up the black community and to look at some key audiences and demographics, and to identify some potential problems going into this election cycle. And the truth is, we got some problems going into the final stretch here. Joe Biden is significantly underperforming Hillary Clinton's losing margins amongst black voters. And we do see that concentrated amongst black men, and particularly young black men under the age of 49, where Donald Trump is receiving 18% of the vote. We also identified some other problems here with that seem to indicate that black voters are being bombarded with misinformation and disinformation, and it's beginning to impact not only how they feel about Joe Biden, but how they feel about Kamala Harris. And so, I'm looking forward to unpacking this some more, and finally breaking out some crosstabs of black folks that realize that we are not a monolith.
Alicia, that particular point, disinformation, we've had Shireen Mitchell on this show talking about that. People are getting stuff from, they're getting it from Facebook. And the thing is, I've said to the Biden people, the Harris people, look, you got to counter disinformation. You can't just let it sit out there and and where there's no response to it whatsoever. We got some audio issues with you. Make sure your microphone is up. Guys, can we pull up her audio, please?
Can you hear me okay?
Now we got you. Go ahead.
All right, cool. Well, I was just saying, Roland, you and I have been talking about this for at least a year. And we came on to the show a year ago and talked about our Black Census Project. And we've been hearing for a long time that not only are black men being left out and left behind, especially when it comes to political campaigns, but we've also been talking for a ton of time now about the ways in which black communities are being targeted with disinformation and misinformation. And frankly, as somebody who's a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Global Network, nobody knows more about misinformation or disinformation than I do. I mean, in this moment, Roland, black voters are being assaulted by the kind of misinformation and disinformation that is trying to keep people away from the polls. And in this particular political moment, Roland, what we're finding is that lies are spreading much faster than the truth. But here's the other thing that I know, and we're so proud to partner with Hit Strategies on this groundbreaking poll, because 30 days out from the election, it's time for us to stop saying black voters are not a monolith. We've been saying this for a long time now. It's actually time for these campaigns to be taking action. And so what this poll has done is really laid out in very clear terms what it means to target black voters in such a way that is addressing the concerns that we have. And it's also being very, very clear that if these two candidates, Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, if their campaign is not taking this seriously, it's sure to have an impact at the polls, and it's sure to make sure that the impact of this election season is not what most of us would want it to be.
Terrance, when you talked about going inside of those numbers, even though we have less than a month, 27 days to Election Day, what should candidates be looking at doing with these numbers? Is it too late to appeal to these voters? What should they be doing? What kind of messaging? Where should they be trying to reach them?
It's not too late, and a lot of black voters are still undecided. I've been saying since January that black men are the real swing voters in this election, and can frankly determine the outcome in a lot of the battlegrounds that we've all been paying close attention to. But when you look at this data, it is quite clear that for black voters across demographics, for younger black voters and under black voters, for black men and for black women, rural and urban, the issues are clear. The top issues for black voters are COVID-19, racism, and the economy. The order of those three issues may alternate depending on what group of black voters you look at, but those three issues are consistent. And until we lean into racism, I mean, we cannot, and this goes for the entire Democratic Party. This is not just a Joe Biden problem. This is a Democratic problem that we all have to confront. And I want to acknowledge what Joe Biden said in his Gettysburg speech today, where he really leaned into the moral imperative of the nation solving the original sin of racism. But Democrats have to realize that we cannot respond to racism with economic policies and more affordable health care. There is an anxiety amongst black voters, specifically amongst younger black voters, younger black men who are closest to this pain, who are the reason many of us have gone out into the streets and protests. That anxiety we have to lean into. We have to present an alternative view of a view of America that leans into racism. But also, Roland, we really do have to do a better job of defining Senator Kamala Harris here. She has been taking the brunt of this misinformation and disinformation. And frankly, she's being used to discredit him. And we asked the question, does Joe Biden picking Kamala Harris as his VP make you more or less likely to support him? And overwhelmingly amongst black voters, 70 to 80% of black voters are more likely to support Joe Biden because he chose Kamala Harris. But 14% of younger black voters are less likely to support Joe Biden because he chose Kamala Harris. And had you told me that 3 months ago, that there would be black voters that wouldn't support him if he chose her, I would thought it was unbelievable. But when I asked in focus groups recently in Florida, a young black man, 25-year-old black man in Florida said to me, I know what Joe Biden's priorities are as president because he chose a top cop as his vice president. He just wants to lock up more black people. I don't know about you, Roland, but I've never heard a young black man use the word top cop. That is, he is repeating verbatim what he is hearing in misinformation and disinformation, and we have got to combat that, and we have to do a better job of raising her profile, of telling her story, and using her to anchor this candidacy.
But Alicia, I'll be perfectly honest. That was a fault of Senator Kamala Harris. Her campaign did not realize what her greatest Achilles heel was, and then they started emphasizing the top cop language as well in this whole idea of appealing, let's just be clear, to white voters who are all about law and order. And so there's a difference between saying I'm the top cop when you're not a cop. You're not. They should have been framing themselves in the same vein as the Marilyn Mosbys, the Stephanie Moraleses, the Aramis Ayalas before Marilyn Mosby, Stephanie Morales, and Aramis Ayala even came on board. And so that's also on them.
I couldn't agree with you more, Roland. And honestly, this election cycle has aged me about 15 years because we actually did. We begged so many of these campaigns to stop using this kind of language, but also not to let other people shape your story for you. As somebody who's born and raised here in California, somebody who was of age when Kamala Harris was district attorney here in San Francisco, I can tell you her record is actually much more complicated than the misinformation campaigns would have you think. But at the end of the day, it was not a great decision from her earlier presidential run to not tell her story on her own terms. And at the end of the day, Roland, I have to just say, this is a function of who's running these campaigns in the first place.
Yep.
And the facts of the matter is, it's not folks who are deeply connected to our communities. They are using formulas that weaponize race, that triangulate around race in order to appeal to white suburban voters, particularly white women. We have found time and time again that when campaigns don't pay particular attention and do deep investment in Black communities, that we have the kind of scenario that we're seeing now and that Terrance is describing. It's not too late, though. We have 29 days to set the record straight and to make sure that we're getting our stories out on our own terms. The question is, are we going to be able to sidestep some of the white men who are running these campaigns and let them know that we actually know what's going on in our communities much more than they do? And what's at stake, frankly, is whether or not our communities turn out to vote. We're not unclear about who to vote for. It's about being unclear as to whether or not our vote will even matter. And that's the challenge we have to address.
I'll bring our panel here with questions. Joseph, your question first for Alicia and Terrance.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, thank you guys so much for joining us. I think obviously this election cycle is giving us all gray hairs, but looking a little bit further into the future, I'll start with you, Terrance. Maybe what are the things that you think we can be doing as a people when you start talking about a movement of Black voters to demand that we have both parties being accountable to the promises they make and responsive to the needs of our community? I think obviously right now we would agree we have a Democratic Party that is responsive to the needs of Black people, but not necessarily accountable for the promises they make, and the Republican Party that in many ways is kind of content to be neither responsive or accountable, simply for the fact that in many ways they've been able to win elections by being neither. So what are the things that you think, and digging through the data that you've been compiling, not just here, but also in the past, about as we move towards a new American majority, what are the things that we can do to start accelerating progress so that both parties are actually actively contesting for our votes on equal footing?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I want to give you a quote from a Black man in Pennsylvania. Just last Thursday, I hosted these focus groups. Actually, these are actually previous focus groups. But a Black man said to me that my hood did not get better under Obama, and it didn't get worse under Trump. So tell me what these presidents got to do with me. And that's the real challenge that we have. This is not just a Democratic problem. There's a systemic problem here where Black men, to Alicia's point, Black men are deciding whether or not they continue to engage politically, whether or not they actually benefit. I asked, when is the last time voting made your life better? And the silence was deafening. It was deafening. It has never made their lives better. And so this is a moral imperative, I believe, for us to really empower communities. We have to stop this transactional approach to politics. That is, if you vote, then all of your problems are solved, and really engage Black voters and young voters in civic responsibility and what we must do to bring about the change that we want, and to demand from politics, from politicians, and from the political system the changes that we would like to see. And frankly, I mean, there's a justifiable cynicism, a justifiable lack of trust. And so we can't continue to lead with, policy promises and policy prescriptions. And if you vote for me, then I will give you all of these things. They don't believe us anymore. We have to start engaging with answering the question, what have you done for me lately? And this is what I advise all of my candidates. You have to lead with your record. Lead with what you've been doing, and that way that there's a proof of concept here. You begin to show that people are actually working and fighting on your behalf to improve the issues that you say are important, and then we can begin to lean into policy prescriptions. But we really do have to show the efficacy of politics. Does it actually have an impact on their lives? We know the answer to this, but how well are we communicating that answer?
Lauren, next question.
How you doing, Alicia and Terrance? I wanted to get your comments on the part of politics that involves the money. I think so often what happens in this game is that the Democratic Party specifically only pays attention to who gives them money. One of the reasons why we see certain demographics in charge of these campaigns are those are demographics that give them money. Particularly, I was thinking, and I'm not making a commentary on the work of these groups, but I do think about what you were saying about white women, and I think about NARAL and Planned Parenthood and Emily's List, and I think Planned Parenthood's work is great, but I think the reason they get attention that black voters don't get is because they have the money piece. We have the voting piece, but we have a voting piece that they don't have, but they have the money piece, and I wanted to just hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I can jump in here. I mean, I think that that's a fair assumption. I mean, we know actually now that Planned Parenthood is being led by our sister, Alexis McGill Johnson, who's only the second black woman ever to head that organization. But bigger than this, I think you're absolutely right that money inside of politics is really what helps to lead towards these skewed and faulty types of strategies that don't actually deliver the votes. So while they may be following these Democratic donors, those donors aren't actually delivering the kinds of votes that they need for Democrats to win. What we know about demographics in this country is that communities of color, particularly Latinx communities, are becoming the demographic majority in this nation. And demographics is not destiny, but what is destiny is that our communities, if organized, right, and if invested in, could turn out to be the largest voting blocks in these election cycles. But it's a lack of vision, frankly, that allows for these kind of top donors to be leading the strategies rather than people rooted in communities that have everything to gain from turning out and everything to lose from democracy withering away. And so we have seen this happen on their watch. And frankly, if this election season isn't enough to do an about face, I'm not really sure what else can be enough.
Terrance, real quick, you got an answer?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, frankly, Democrats are going to have to become more loyal and responsive to their most loyal voters. Black women are not only the most likely voters in America, they're the most loyal voters in the Democratic Party. And I want to push back on the money idea as well. I mean, I spoke to the Boulay archons last week and gave them a political briefing on what the state of the election was. And when they asked me what they can do to improve these numbers, I told them directly, hold your money, earmark it. When you give money to the Democratic Party, you tell them, I want this to go towards raising the profile of Kamala Harris. I want this to go towards empowering and mobilizing black men. There's plenty of black money in this party. We have to start weaponizing our money until our agenda and our communities are being advanced.
Mustafa, final question.
Yeah, this is either for Terrance or Alicia. You know, we got 27 days left. We're honoring Fannie Lou Hamer when she once said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I just had conversations with black folks in Appalachia. And yes, there are some black folks there. What do we do in the next 27 days to reach those folks who've been unseen and unheard?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start off by saying what we do in the next 27 days to make sure that our folks who have been left out and left behind are at the center of this election season is we've got to turn them out. We've got to make sure that folks like LaTosha Brown from Black Voters Matter, that the folks from the Movement for Black Lives, the folks from the Black to the Future Action Fund, and all of these other entities that are going into our communities and motivating and mobilizing voters and have been for the last year, have the resources that they need so that we can close the gap between the outreach and the investment that the party's been doing and the outreach and investment that's needed to get everybody involved. The second thing I think we need to make sure we're doing is really making sure that these campaigns understand what's at stake. 27 days is not a long time, but it's also not no time. And so there is an opportunity to change course. And actually, this week is a wonderful opportunity to speak to not only the strongest base of the Democratic Party, but also speak to the issues that most Americans care about. And frankly, we missed a huge opportunity last week in the debates to really get into a discussion about race and how it impacts every single system and structure in our society. And this isn't a new opportunity to push back against this BS law and order agenda for some, right, but not for the president and his cronies, but also to offer a pathway forward. And frankly, we shouldn't be telling any lies on that stage. We should be telling people things are hard, but without your participation, things will never get better. Everything you leave on the table, somebody else will eat. That's how we got Donald Trump in the first place.
Folks, where can people actually see more of these survey results, polling results?
Well, you can check out our website at blackfutureslab.org. You can hit up Hit Strategies to get some more information about this polling data. We'll also be doing more events, so follow us to figure out where we'll be. I know Terrance and the crew at Hit Strategies has also been working directly in states with some of our partners like New Florida Majority to really look at, how does this data apply to messaging? And so we want to keep you all in the loop. So if you want to follow us, check us out at blackfutureslab.org.
Alicia Garza, Terrance Woodbury, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roland.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, we support Black-owned businesses here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. The folks at Seek.com, they, of course, have a couple of things. Their virtual reality headset right here, folks. You just drop your cell phone right in. You can look at their content on Seek.com or look at 360-degree video right here through this headset. It's an actually, it's pretty fabulous to actually be in the room, in the place with that virtual reality video. They also have these great 360-degree 4D headphones. Gamers love them. You can listen to music, watch videos, great surround sound. All of that's great. These two devices here you can get from Seek.com, CEEK.com. Use the promo code RMVIP2020, RMVIP2020. And we certainly thank Mary Spiel, the founder of the company, and folks at Seek.com for being supporters of Roland Martin Unfiltered.